So this is part 2 of Unit 4 for AP US History Review, the period 1800 to 1848. In this video, we will be talking about the War of 1812. France and England have just kind of had a history of being mad at each other and having conflict, so this is what begins the War of 1812. So in May of 1806, London ordered that all French ports either be blocked or they could go through English ports in order to then reach France. Napoleon's strike back for this was the Berlin Decree, which said that all ships that entered British ports would be seized. So America, they wanted to stay neutral throughout this whole thing. That's what Jefferson wanted to do. And so that just caused a problem because they lost two of their major trading partners. Also, Britain at this time started re-impressing the Americans. They were making sailors enlist in the Royal Navy. An example of this is the Chesapeake Leopard affair, which occurred in 1807. The HMS Leopard fired at the USS Chesapeake ship, and 3 Americans were killed, 18 were wounded, and 4 were impressed. Jefferson really wanted to avoid war, so his first tactic was the Embargo Act. This cut off all trade in and out of the US, which, as you can imagine, would obviously cause some problems. He really thought that Europe depended on the US greatly, but he was wrong. They were able to manage without us. This would lead to a brief revival of the Federalist Party because obviously the Republicans were kind of failing the US. And then in 1801, Congress repealed the Embargo Act. This was a couple of days before Jefferson would leave presidency. To replace the Embargo Act, the Non-Intercourse Act was passed in 1809. This opened trade between all countries and the US except for Britain and France. So now we have Madison in charge, and one of the things that came in to replace the Non-Intercourse Act was Macon's Bill number 2 in 1810, and this said that either Britain could take away their trade restrictions or France could, and whoever were to do it first would gain the US's support in their conflict. France was the first one to agree, and therefore the US had an embargo on Britain only. In 1811, Congress met to decide what they should do about Britain. The younger generation wanted war. These were known as the War Hawks. The most important people of the War Hawks were Henry Clay and John C. Calhoun. These people also wanted to wipe out the Native American threat. An example of this Native American threat was two Shanti brothers, Tecumseh and the Prophet. They were trying to form a confederacy of a bunch of North American Native Americans near Mississippi. This led to the Battle of Tippecanoe in the fall of 1811. William Henry Harrison gathered an army and went to Tecumseh's headquarters. Harrison was able to defeat the Native Americans, and this resulted in an increase in American expansion. Back to the actual War of 1812, it was declared on June 18th of 1812. The army was not actually that good. There wasn't a lot of training. There wasn't a lot of organization. The US moved on to Canada. Our strategy was not actually planned that well. It didn't work out. There were some American successes, such as the Navy, the control of the Great Lakes, and the Battle of Queenston Heights, which was a very important battle. But now we have a problem because Napoleon was defeated in Europe, so Britain could kind of just focus on America before they were really focused on Napoleon, but now they don't have really any more enemies except for us. We have a couple of battles in the US specifically. In New York, we have 10,000 British troops that prepared to go to New York, but Thomas Macdonough, sorry for the pronunciation, at the Battle of Lake Champlain or Plattsburgh in 1814, this was a British retreat, so it was a victory. Now we move on to the Chesapeake area. The British were able to set the White House and Capitol building on fire, and in return, the US burned New York because that was the British headquarters in the US. Now we move on to Mississippi Valley. We have the Battle of New Orleans, where we have General Andrew Jackson. There was a wide variety of people who were in the American Army at this time. We have the Army regulars, we have free black people, sailors, pirates, aristocrats, all these different types of people were involved. This was the most devastating British loss during this time. So the effects of the War of 1812, we have Andrew Jackson as a national hero, which we will talk about later. It was basically a draw. Everyone that was involved in the war didn't really gain anything, didn't really lose anything. It was just kind of there. This led to the Treaty of Ghent in December 24th of 1814. Tsar Alexander of Russia offered to mediate this treaty. 5 American peacemakers went to Belgium, which was where Ghent was. John Quincy Adams was the leader of these peacemakers from America. So the British demands after 1812 was an Indian buffer state in the Great Lakes region. They also wanted control of the Great Lakes in general, and they also wanted a big part of Maine. These requests from the British, though, were rejected by the Americans, and an armistice occurred, which was basically just a ceasefire, and nobody gained or lost anything. And the Treaty of Ghent was signed December 24th, 1814. Along with the end of the war, there were also some Americans who were in general unhappy. So we have the Hartford Convention. Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island sent full representatives, and New Hampshire, Vermont sent partial representatives. This was a secret meeting from December 15th to January 5th to discuss grievances. And basically what they wanted was financial assistance from the lost trade during the Embargo Act. They wanted a 2/3 vote in Congress before an embargo could be placed. New states could be admitted or war could be declared. They wanted to get rid of the 3/5 clause. They wanted to limit the president to a single term, and they wanted to end the idea of their Virginia dynasty, which was basically that presidents after presidents would come from Virginia. The outcome of this was the death of the Federalist Party. They were never able to have another successful running in the presidency. This is the general outcome of the war. There wasn't that much loss. There weren't that many Americans killed or wounded. America gained new respect internationally. There were new war heroes such as Andrew Jackson. The Federalist Party was dead. Native Americans were still left out and suppressed. Canada felt betrayed because they were left out of the Treaty of Ghent. Canada thought that the US would try to invade again, but the Rush-Bagot Agreement in 1817 eased these tensions because there were limits created between the US and Canada, and there was just an overall increase in nationalism in America.